So it's fairly common that you're going to see someone on HGTV or some home remodeling show at some point in the episode, or fairly common, right? To say, hey, I know what we'll do. We'll rip a hole in that wall and put a French door in there. Doors like this are particularly notorious for poor energy performance, especially from an air leakage standpoint. So what can you do? There's a couple different options. So I'm going to show you one way that you can air seal it, or at least how we air seal this one, and sort of the specific situation that this will work in. So while they are awesome, right, because they open and it sort of allows the feeling of inside and outside to disintegrate, and it sort of blurs the line between those two, so it can almost feel like you're outside even when you're inside, just because you have so much of your wall open. One of the problems that you run into is air sealing. So doors like this are particularly notorious for poor energy performance, especially from an air leakage standpoint.
Part of this is due to the fact that they use a center post to close, and this one's pretty loose, which results in an incomplete air seal.
Post. Technical term for that is astragal. An astragal is a vertical molding that serves as the door post between a pair of hinged door panels, which is not to be confused with a mullion. The simple difference between the two: an astragal is attached to one of the doors, a mullion is attached to the frame with both doors closing against it. Yeah, it's a leaky situation.
Story time.
So we had a laundry room door like this growing up, and my dad would always silicone it. He would literally just go around the entire perimeter of the door and silicone it shut. And then if we decided we wanted to use it in the springtime there or over the summer, he'd peel all the silicone off. So that was how he did it.
But hey, it worked.
So we're gonna use something called foam cord or backer rod. I use this a lot when air sealing around windows instead of the expandable foam. So I use this with a combination of like a caulking to seal it up, and this sort of serves as a backing for that caulking.
Or you could just stuff plastic bags in there. I've seen people do that too.
The ultimate long-term strategy for this door is to replace it. So at some point we're gonna tear it out, put a different one in, one that performs a lot better. But in the meantime, for this season, we're gonna air seal it because we're not to that point yet. But this is a case where the old saying, you get what you pay for, holds true, right? Because if you buy a cheap door, well, you bought a cheap door.
Cheap door. Cheap door.
But the level of craftsmanship needs to be there, otherwise it's not going to be installed correctly. So then you have a really expensive door that still might not perform the way you were hoping it would.
Happens all the time.
So I just want to take us around, do a little quick visual inspection, a tour of the store.
Door tour!
To really just kind of show you, hey, here's how you can kind of tell that this wasn't done well.
None of our nail holes have been plugged in the trim. This coat of paint is a little thin. You can see through it in a couple different places in locations on this door. Could have definitely used another coat. This miter, well, yeah, this miter.
Hashtag not how you carpentry.
And this paint right here has got the runs.
Having the runs is not good for people or for paint.
Our reveals are not the same size. Now the reveal is the part of the jamb here that you can see that is shown or revealed as the casing is moved back, and the reveal on the head of the door is not the same size as the reveal on the side of the door. These need to be the same size.
Hashtag not how you carpentry.
So that's just a general look at the level of craftsmanship, or rather the lack thereof. Now let's take a look at the pieces of the door that are going to be affecting our air leakage.
Even just feeling it right here, you can feel a lot of cool air coming in. Right in here, we can feel a lot more cold air, and we can also see a little bit of light coming in. And so in that case, we know that's leaking a lot. So yeah, looking at our door here and just kind of visually inspecting our seal, we see, oh, that makes sense. Looks like there was a foam wedge up here at one point, but it's up here now. This door really needs to sit tight against this seal. It needs to press against it.
But as you can see, it's pretty loose. Our threshold molding has a lot of movement in it. Our seal and weather stripping here needs to be replaced. As you can see, there's some chunks taken out of it, which is a big source of air leakage for this door. We have two seals, an interior one and an exterior one, and both have pieces missing. This is definitely the part of the door where we feel a lot of cold air coming in.
You probably see the light coming through here a little bit. Feel the air. You probably can't feel the air on YouTube, obviously, but if you were here, you could. And then we can just hear stuff, right? That's always a sign. So anytime you can hear Yeah, I can hear leaves outside. I can hear traffic going by. So usually anytime you can hear something, it's because you have some type of air leak. Part of that reason is we know that sound waves travel with air, and so it's just a spot for it to come right through. Not great, but let's take a look on the thermal imaging camera so we can kind of get a feel for what's happening with this door thermally.
What we are going to see is a few different things. We're going to see where we suspect the air leak is and where we feel a lot of the cold air coming in. And so something to keep in mind with a camera like this, though, what you're actually seeing is you're not actually seeing the air leak itself. What you're really seeing is you're seeing the surface temp of everything in the room. And so essentially what we're looking for is evidence of an air leak. But if you took like a smoke stick and we're able to see actually where that air is flowing. So we kind of see the evidence of what the air is doing, and we see that at the bottom of the door here, right? We got indoor temp of like 70, outdoor of like 30, and then we see, oh, we got the bottom of this door is all sitting at like 47, 48, 50 degrees. And one of the things I want to show you is we get this kind of, when looking at an image like this, here's a pretty good spot. We call this sweeping, sweeping. And so you can kind of see how this temperature, or this surface temp, is bleeding out or sweeping across the room into another spot. So that's always, when you're looking at an infrared image, that is a clue or a sign of air leakage. So you can see that the surface temp of the flooring and then that little transition strip there that we have is dropped. And that's because we have cold air coming in, cooling those surfaces down, and then they're registering as cold in our image. So that's sort of a look at the bottom of this door and what it looks like, and we can basically see what that air is doing, the cool air as it's coming in. It's not just cooling down the room, it's not just cooling down the air in the room, it's also cooling down the surfaces, and that's what we're gonna see on an infrared camera. Here is a much more drastic example of sweeping so you can get an idea for what the concept looks like. So instead of a cold air, we have a hot air source, this radiator here, and as that hot air rises, it is bringing this surface temp of the wall up, and we see that sweeping of temperature across the wall. And we kind of got, our classic cold corner there. You can see the edges of the windows here are cool as well. And we can also see this cool strip right along our post. Now, what a camera like this one tries to do is it tries to take a infrared image, and then it tries to take a regular image, and then it overlays the two. That's why we can kind of see the edges, which are helpful, but they can be a little bit off. So there's a little degree of error in this, but it gets us a pretty good idea, right? This cool strip here, we know is that seam right at that door. And likewise, we can see up top here, we got, it's cool around those spots right where we could see light coming through, and we're suspecting the air leakage.
Okay, so what you need to do this, not a whole lot. A couple things that are gonna be helpful to you as you do this. A butter knife. This isn't for actually cutting it, though you probably could use it to cut it with this. But basically this is for taking it and stuffing it into the slot as we go along. Another thing is just, box cutter for actually cutting the foam. And if you want, it's not a bad idea to use, just like a cutting board or piece of cardboard or something to cut the foam on. That way you're not scratching into your floor. Or different sizes of this. They make like 1/4 inch, 3/8, 5/8, 1, just a bunch. It's really just going to be a matter of getting the right size. So we want a little bit of fit as we try to stuff it in there. And the other trick is we can always cut it in half if we need to, the long way, to try to get it to fit in there.
This stuff is very easy to cut. You can cut it in place, or you can take it down, measure it, and cut it on a cutting board. If you find that the piece you have is too thick to fit in the gap you're trying to fill, you can always cut it in half, slicing it the long way to get it to fit.
I like to use this thumb right here, sort of a guide. Basically, I'm taking it and pressing it against the foam, holding that knife at a consistent angle to just kind of, for a consistent distance, to just kind of make a nice, hopefully even cut. There's a piece we stuffed in there from last year. Check it out. Just unroll it, and then all we gotta do is stuff it in there. And if you can't get it with your fingers, that's why we brought our butter knife. So you can use the back of the knife if you need to just get it right in there. You can use the pointy end of it as well. And we're just gonna work it all the way across until our whole gap is filled up. Once I have it tucked in here all the way up to where our existing seal over here as part of the door is actually still intact, I'm just gonna cut it off right there. And then stuff it in. I mean, you don't have to have any fancy equipment like a thermal imaging camera or something, although they do come in handy if you're kind of a nerd and interested in this sort of stuff. But I mean, really, just use your hands. Like, you're gonna be able to feel, especially on a cold day where it's a little breezy out like this, you're just gonna be able to feel all the cold air leaking in. The other thing you could do, if you have a smoke stick, you could light that and see where the smoke goes, just to see, hey, where's the air movement coming from? Or you could use what I've heard is a poor man's smoke stick, which is just a cigarette. You might find if you use the sharp point that you actually stick through the foam. To a corner like this, so we've come up here and we're at this T. We've got a couple different options. I mean, you can cut it and start a new strip, or you can turn with it and keep going. In general, we want to try to keep this as continuous as possible, because the less joints you have where these, where two ends are overlapping, essentially the better air seal you're going to have around the door.
It's important to know that backer rod installed this way is going to solve for large leaks, so it's not going to do very much for kind of the other seals on the door or some of the smaller cracks. Playing back the before and after footage side by side, we can see there's not a huge difference in temperature at the bottom of the door, but what we do see is a lot less sweeping, which means we have less air leakage. An infrared image, of course, isn't the best way to take a look and really evaluate the effectiveness of the air sealing, right? Because the infrared looks at temp. What we really want to do is find out the effectiveness of the air sealing. So the best way to do that would be with something like an air leakage test or a blower door test. But even with the infrared image, we can still see that, okay, this has made a difference. For better results, you could use this in conjunction with sort of the plastic window film, just oversized for a door. The key to getting those to work really effectively is when you have your double-sided tape, is to make sure you have a continuous and unbroken air seal all the way around, right? So you've got no gaps where the plastic isn't touching this and no space where this hasn't, right? So we need a continual seal all the way around that door, which depending on your trims and moldings and casing can be kind of hard to make happen, but that's what you're shooting for when you're sealing with this stuff. And in our case with the door, we'd even want to seal in front of the threshold, probably right down to the floor, because we know there's air leaking underneath that threshold. Keep in mind that using backer rod, or if you were to use the plastic window film, is a semi-permanent installation, so it's going to work best on a seasonal door that you don't use in the wintertime. Otherwise, you're going to have to reapply it every time you go and use the door.
It's a bit of a leaky situation.
This hardware is not to be confused with a mullion. Mutton. Yeah, we're eating sheep. Mullion.
That door right there is leakier than Porcupine's waterbed.
Mullion, astragal is fixed to the door, a mullion is fixed to the frame. Something just moved.
That's creepy.
People got the runs.